Good evening to you. Today I want to bring through to you a little discussion, okay? A little discussion on how the world events are playing out. So I trust you will be able to listen and analyze, of course. Analyze it, listen analytically, but let's see how much we can watch the events unfold, understand, without having prejudice about our political bias. So at present in Sri Lanka, now tomorrow morning, on Monday morning, we are supposed to lift the lockdown. Now, is it wise or not? How do we think? Now in UK at the moment, there's a complete lockdown. They gave up their 3-tier system of first tier, you can't do these things, second tier, you can't do these things, third tier, you can't do these things. They gave up their 3-tier lockdown and went into complete shutdown. Now in UK, the situation is quite a large weight of scientific opinion says that going into that lockdown was unnecessary because the R rate was coming down, the infectivity rate of the virus, and that the clusters were getting smaller. So the wave was flattening or plateauing is the word. So there are many scientists who claim that. Some famous Oxford scientists also claim that. Whereas the scientists who were advising the Prime Minister have quickly opted for a lockdown. Now lockdown has its own economic consequences. Besides that, the medical scientists are saying more people will die because of the lockdown, because cancer patients, other emergencies, suicide and so on, from their last experience of the lockdown, many people died because of non-COVID reasons. And initially it was all listed down as COVID deaths. So recently there was a controversial statement by President Trump saying that the doctors were given money to mark down COVID deaths, all deaths as COVID. Now he uses bad language, but actually what happened was all deaths that happened during the first COVID wave were put down as COVID deaths without even doing a PCR test. And the relevant institution was given extra funds, $200 per day, to take care of the complications or the burial procedures and so on. Then there are other scientists who are also claiming and making a charge, maybe an indictment, that postmortems are not allowed to hide the fact that many people who died and were listed as COVID were in fact having secondary disease that got the better of them. Now, all what this that line of argument has been validated by the fact that just about 8 weeks ago, CDC recalibrated their causes of death, and the original number of actual deaths due to COVID was brought down to 6% of the original. Now, that did not hit the mainline media. So I'm addressing the scientific issues. I'm going to look at 5 mountains today: the science sphere, the government sphere, the biz sphere, and the education sphere, and the other sphere, the other large sphere about media, entertainment and sports. Who makes opinion for whom and how? That is the basic trend of my thought. Try to listen without political bias. I will try to present to you facts for consideration and analysis from a very neutral scientific vantage point. So, in UK, one group of doctors who have now opened a website, they are scientists, medical scientists and other scientists, headed by Professor Sunetra Gupta, has a professor of epidemiology, Oxford, a well-known scholar, reputed scholar involved in different kinds of research. She spearheaded or gave leadership to a group that has now come up as a recovery group, and their website is called Time for Recovery, and about 5,000 academic scientists of different fields are on that website, and they have already enlisted more than 100,000 signatures, asking for another point of view also to be considered by the government of UK. So they say, do shielding of vulnerable people, immunocompromised, diabetes, hypertensive, pregnancy, keep them at home, but do not lock down the whole of society. So if you go to the Time of Recovery website, or if you type the name Sunetra Gupta, she is professor of epidemiology of Oxford, you will get to that group, and what they are saying is that the epidemiological measures need dialogue, and just two professors should not be advising the Prime Minister of England, who has to take hasty decisions based on professional advice. And there have been other accusations that have been coming from another website. They also present a scientific case, World Doctors Alliance, headed by Professor Dolores Cahill, professor in Ireland, a medical biomed tech professor well known for her field. She is disputing many things, including the PCR test. So what are the things in this field of science that you should take if you are that kind? Certainly if you are a doctor, legislator, decision maker, anyway connected with the scientific field, or a teacher, maybe just a parent, just a citizen, you need to read the other side to equip yourself with scientific knowledge to make informed decision without going by political pride or prejudice. Let's get to Sense and Sensibility. So I have quoted two titles of Jane Austen, No Pride and Prejudice. Let's get to Sense and Sensibility. So World Doctors Alliance, headed by or leadership given by Professor Dolores Cahill, who is a well-known biomed tech expert person, professor, and many other professors. Their website is called WDA. They make inroads into many other areas. For instance, they specifically mention about hydroxychloroquine being effective, why it is not being used. So you must not throw out hydroxychloroquine as a fringe thing, the Trump-touted drug, and throw it out, because there's quite a lot of scientific research evidence which the main media are not putting up, and in fact main media and the Oxford recovery trial did their best to criminalize hydroxychloroquine. But there's a very strong case for hydroxychloroquine. Since my last substantive post was as head of Department of Pharmacology in a state medical faculty in Sri Lanka, and I am published on low-dose aspirin and NSAIDs, Parkinsonism and levodopa, then irritable bowel syndrome. I have done research, I am published, and my research is available on NIH, PubMed websites or in their records. So my most technical analysis will be on pharmacology, though we did have basic training in immunology, pathology, virology, and so on. So the case for hydroxychloroquine is very strong. Recently, Professor Harvey Risch, Yale, professor of epidemiology, Yale, came out strongly saying you have to consider hydroxychloroquine. So why did a professor of epidemiology come out with this? What shall I say? He published an academic article, gave interviews, and he was interviewed by MSN as well as other news sites. Why did he come out strongly saying you must consider hydroxychloroquine and give it early, not to deny patients the drug that works, because UK does not give any drug and people are dying. So I'll come to that later. So why Professor Harvey Risch said that is because he was following the wordometer of Johns Hopkins University, that they mark every day new cases and deaths from COVID. And what they had marked was between May 27th and June 8th, they did not give hydroxychloroquine because of the Lancet article that the Lancet published an article from Sugisphere, a duplicitous unknown source of data, saying hydroxychloroquine does not work. They did a meta-analysis, the right language from randomized clinical controlled trials, the right language, but did a lot of fraud, and Lancet published the article, which a major journal must never do. They retracted the article because the article was wrong, fraudulent, mistakes. But during that time, Switzerland did not give hydroxychloroquine. So Switzerland's ratio of new deaths to new cases was about 1.5%, and interval of not giving hydroxychloroquine, their death rates rose like that and plateaued, and then they started giving hydroxychloroquine again, and death rates came down. Now this is available on my timeline. If you do a search on Switzerland, Professor Harvey Risch, R-I-S-C-H, you will see all this. So he made a convincing case on the basis of pharmacology that hydroxychloroquine worked. What happened? The fake establishment really lambasted him, called him all kinds of names and ulterior motives. They called him an ecology freak and a denier of global warming and all kinds of. So that's the other side of the bandwagon, that global warming is happening and we should do something. The virus is real and the pandemic just came and we must get a vaccine somehow soon and fast. So that's the broadside that goes on in mainstay media. So Harvey Risch was shredded to pieces, a Google scholar with 47 very, very good publications in esteemed journals, was shredded to pieces. Similarly, Professor Diderot of Marseille's National Institute of Infection, a reputed pharmacology scholar who first brought out the efficacy of hydroxychloroquine as a thiopurine and zinc, of course. He was also lambasted, and thankfully 20 scholars published a scholarly article on the injustice of making fake accusations against two world-class scholars. That is also available. If you want any of these things, any of these publications, the websites and the links, please WhatsApp me on +94 77 49 59 214. I can send you the relevant details. So I am on this topic of how is science going. So that's about the fact that hydroxychloroquine really works and is not being given. And CDC and Dr. Fauci makes a claim against it. Then the Oxford trial happened, and in the recovery trial, they give hydroxychloroquine quite late to eventually patients who had a death rate of 24%. When hydroxychloroquine was being given in Switzerland, for instance, death rate was 1.5%. In the recovery trial done by Oxford, in the control group, death rate was 24%. So that's completely unacceptable. And what is not highlighted is the dose of hydroxychloroquine given was completely wrong. So it was a real substandard academic trial, though carrying the name of Oxford. And then halfway through the trial, they introduced remdesivir produced by Gilead Pharmaceuticals, Gilead. They are the ones who produce remdesivir. Later to see, both Professor Landry and Professor Hobie, who were involved in that trial, are funded by Gilead to the tune of many million pounds. So that's the other side of the story. So if you want to verify all this, please go to a website called covexit.com, covexit.com. You will get all these details. Also, there's a French news site publication, Fransoir, FRANSSOIR.com, that will also give all these details, quite verifiable. What am I at? So there is a vast amount of opinion that is saying consider a different policy, give hydroxychloroquine early, do shielding of vulnerable people, don't shut down cities or nations, let them function, but shield the vulnerable. Who are the vulnerable? The diabetics, the pregnant people, the obese people, hypertensive people, immunocompromised people, people on cancer drugs, people on renal diseases, and so on. shield them, don't shut down. That's the clarion call of the group of scientists who call themselves Time of Recovery, given leadership by Professor Sunetra Gupta of Epidemiology, Professor of Epidemiology, Oxford. So what should you do now? You can always take vitamin D and zinc. Results, clinical trials have proven that vitamin D and zinc are both preventive and therapeutic. So what should we do in Sri Lanka or any other country for contacts or for anybody else really? Give a daily dose of vitamin D, initially double the daily dose, maybe about 1,000 international units daily for about a week to for about a month to catch up, and a zinc daily dose. Later you can get down to half the dose, yes. Vitamin D and zinc are therapeutic. That means if the virus is on, it heals, it attacks the virus. Zinc attacks the virus, meaning what the zinc does in the cell becomes alkaline, and the virus cannot multiply in an alkaline cell. And vitamin D builds up immunity, and specifically the specific proreceptor molecules. So the COVID virus was worst in countries with the flu shot, where they are already having an immune compromised situation, which many argue was the reason for giving so many flu shots. So you need to read Dr. Robert Kennedy Jr. and Defense of Children website by him, Children Defense website, I think, Dr. Robert Kennedy. It's worth reading. So what I'm building up is the 5 spheres in which a concerted effort is going on, which is not scientific but fake science. So I have discussed in detail the Time of Recovery website headed by Professor Sunetra Gupta, Professor of Epidemiology, Oxford, and the World Doctors Alliance website, WDA. They are quite extensive on different fields. That is headed by Professor Dolores Cahill, an Irish lady. She's an expert and a reputed scholar in the biomed tech. This is exactly her field. In Sri Lanka, what is happening and causing alarm is people are falling dead. One person who were released from a quarantine center. Now we have taken a decision to release people without a final PCR test after 14 days. Truth is that after 7 days, it's unlikely that people will infect others, and if you are asymptomatic, it is unlikely that you will infect others. That's the truth. But my suggestion is now, because of this situation, give hydroxychloroquine to everyone who is PCR positive, and with zinc. Why? Because this infection, this particular virus strain, D614G strain, and this particular mutant does the pathogenesis faster. That means it develops the disease quicker inside, besides being more infective, besides the R rate being higher. So giving PCR, all PCR positive, dose of hydroxychloroquine for 5 days is simple therapy, cheap, effective, and safe. Hydroxychloroquine has been used for rheumatoid arthritis and SLE for a long period of time. So when initially also hydroxychloroquine was negated and criticized as being unsafe, everybody, those who know pharmacology live, there is a big narrative, this is false. Nobody said hydroxychloroquine was unsafe, when in the West, every day people are taking hydroxychloroquine for systemic lupus erythematosus and rheumatoid arthritis because it's an immunomodulatory drug. So what hydroxychloroquine does is, it prevents the spike protein attaching to the S2 receptor, and hydroxychloroquine with zinc, hydroxychloroquine is a zinc ionophore, helps zinc to get inside the cell, and therefore the zinc action is better. And even inside the cell, hydroxychloroquine has definite effects of stopping the different viral proteins. The danger of COVID-19 SARS-CoV-2 is that once it gets into the cell, it can spread from cell to cell, for instance in the lung epithelium, through the syncytial processes, cell to cell. It can go from cell to cell without coming into the interstitial space outside where immune cells or antibodies are working. So this is the reason why it's necessary to stop the virus early. And hydroxychloroquine can stop the virus early. vitamin D and zinc are essential part of the process, as I explained to you. So in Sri Lanka, either the people in charge of the infectious disease hospital or the SLMA have to make an informed decision by reading all the websites and all the academic publications, as I do. They must come to informed decision that it is time now to treat everybody with PCR positive with hydroxychloroquine and zinc. At least give vitamin D and zinc, which is quite non-controversial. This we must insist on. Any medical person listening to this, you must get into your spheres of influence and insist on this, that it is time now for PCR positive people with or without symptoms to get a course of hydroxychloroquine. And the reason is valid even the more because now we are discharging people without a final PCR test. So it is good to give a dose of hydroxychloroquine. That's as far as the science part of that goes and the battles that have been ensuing. There is no doubt that this virus was a made virus, genetically engineered. The old coronavirus, at a point where it is split off by a furin enzyme, that's the enzymes used for genetic engineering, and there is a section of the HIV virus that has been joined together to make the spike protein of the virus penetrate the cell faster. That's why COVID is very quickly getting inside the cell lining once when it is in the human body. So that's a part of science. What else do I like to say about the science? So remdesivir was introduced through the back door, whereas there is an excellent regime with hydroxychloroquine and zinc regime described by East Virginia University. And there is an excellent website run by North Virginia Medical School. It's called emcrit.org, emcrit.org, emcrit.org. Anyone in the medical field must follow that website every day, as I do. I told you earlier Covexit, Covexit. Then there's another website called sciencemag.com. That also you need to follow. The other website I always follow from my days as head of Department of Pharmacology is the Elsevier website, which is a French magazine with no drug companies connected with it. Therefore, it is reliable. It is also called sciencedirect.com. Please go into these websites and you will know the truth. Incidentally, Professor Dieter Raoult's work on hydroxychloroquine and zinc and azathioprine is now part of the NIH, NIB, PubMed database. His research is there in the database. So no one can say there's no evidence, this anecdotal evidence, no randomized clinical control trial. All this jargon language is non-applicable once your research gets into that database. So that's why I strongly say there was a global campaign by fake media and fake scientists to criminalize a simple, cheap, effective, safe drug, hydroxychloroquine. So then the question arises, why did they do that? To see more deaths happening, which it dastardly, see more deaths happening, so that the cry for vaccine becomes incessant. Now a little bit about the vaccine. If a vaccine is going to be effective, it should improve innate, adaptive, trained immunity with T cells and so on. Now, there was a vaccine research by the Washington Medical School recently. They claimed that. But when a vaccine claims that there was a good antibody response, it means nothing. Antibodies come up and antibodies go down. What a proper vaccine research will let us know how the T cells are behaving with the vaccine. Then on the other side, there are allegations going on saying vaccines are using too many proteins and that will put up a false antibody response. This is true. Then that the vaccines that have been given is is converting trained adaptive immunity to active immune processes, immune inflammatory processes. That's why the people who got the flu shot vaccine also had lots of immune compromise. They had their specific pro-resolver molecules down. So across the belt in the world, in countries that got the flu shot, they are the ones who suffered with COVID infection most. Flu shot equals immune compromising. So when they want to give another vaccine, saying COVID vaccine, and they are saying even if it is 50% effective, we must give the vaccine, which means one okay, one not okay. Now in actual science, you would have never given a vaccine which is only 50% effective. So this is the story about the vaccines, and who and why the vaccine, who wants to give so many vaccines for what purpose. There's an avalanche of clips going around, articles going around. The most vocal opponent or the advocate against this COVID vaccine may be Dr. Robert Kennedy and many others, of course, that Bill Gates is trying to get with this vaccine nanocrystals, and they will then pieces of RNA that will further denude the integrity of the human genome. And then there is a claim that nanocrystals can act like antennas for 5G technology. This is not my field of expertise, so I can't comment on it more than that. Only thing that you need to know is that there is another side of evidence that you need to look at without getting politically biased. What you should know is that the European Union scientists petitioned against 5G, so you have to only do 5G plus European Union plus scientists. You will get an article where they advise the European Union not to have 5G towers everywhere. Now a company has got ready to beam 5G from satellites to cover all of UK. So there are people who say 5G technology is for face recognition. This social distancing is to effect the the 5G technology for digital identification, that you will get a digital passport saying you got these vaccines, you didn't get these vaccines. Accordingly, you can't go to work or travel or even enter a store. So this thing about a digital marker here, strangely, the book called the Bible has a section that says there'll be a time when men will introduce a marker by which they'll be known with a number on. So that's the ancient book with this story, but without knowing that also, for some length of time, we have seen a global coercion of world bodies like UNICEF, UNESCO, WHO, moving to take sovereign choice out of the sovereign nations. The world bodies deciding for sovereign nations. So the battle in US is also about a president who is for American sovereignty as against a candidate who is for the global regime, or what shall I say, the global philosophy of new social equality. Yes, it's a kind of new socialist, leftist, technocratic society that is being designed. I'm not talking this way or that way, I'm just saying the technical terms used for the philosophy that rulers, even like Macron, stand for. They stand for an elitist rule because the Mahajanatava, the public, really don't know. I think it's a dangerous theory. Democracy, with all its faults, is supposed to be by the people, for the people, through the people. So when few technocrats feel people don't know, people shouldn't govern themselves, they are idiots, they are foolish, we know all, let us cook the system that all get cooked well, is a very dangerous philosophy. Eugenicists do this, Hitler did it, and all dictators in time and history have done this thing that people really don't know. We are the people who know. In Sri Lanka also, in politics, you may figure out that there must be globally leaning political affiliations and those who are conscious of keeping national sovereignty. So again here, I'm not talking politics, I'm talking sociological reality, geopolitical reality. That's how the way it is developing. One word of China. I have only done the science part of it. I could not get into government too much. If I am able tonight at a later time, I meant to do 5 things. I wanted to do the science part of it. I wanted to do the government part of it. I wanted to do the corporate biz part of it. I wanted to do the education part of it. And I wanted to do the where entertainment, media, and sports fit in. My last clip was about the family, last 2 clips, so I feel I have done enough about the family. So here I am going to stop that if we do not make our scientific decisions with our local experts and our local professors, will have to read all the articles, all the websites I have mentioned, and this is a real battle. This is a real battle. This is not a battle I wanted to enter into, but when I saw the fastidious facade that was going on with hydroxychloroquine, I felt I should get back into this detailed academic studies on that subject on which I have prior training. So my talk today was mostly about the current science of the COVID situation. I think that's about all I can do right now. Maybe we will join up later for the other things. If you would please ask me some questions through my WhatsApp, +94 77 49 59 214. If I didn't make something clear, or on my Facebook, ask me the questions, please, so that our listening together may be a little more two-way. Thank you for listening.